Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Debra Ward, Global Transitions Director at ISS Facility Services UK. Coming up on today's show, Debra demonstrates some high-level problem solving.
So I ended up buying a blow-up doll and dressing it and putting it in the passenger seat. So when I drove home, I didn't get stopped.
Phil questions the integrity of his guest. Oh my God.
And
who have I invited on the show? And Debra gets herself into a bit of a pickle.
Because the next thing you know, I had 4 NIA guards with semi-automatic rifles charge into my office and haul me off and interrogate me for 4.5 hours.
All that and so much more as Debra talks us through her spectacular story so far, with not only some phenomenal anecdotes, but with some superb golden nuggets centred around having an exceptional mindset. Don't forget, we launch a brand new episode each week telling the amazing and always amusing stories from hospitality. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and give us a like and a share across your favourite social networks. Let's share these amazing stories as far as we can. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street. Today we move into the world of facilities management, and not only that, we're speaking to somebody who's coming from one of the industry's massive companies. We have someone with a brilliant job title as well, so I am delighted to welcome Global Transition Director of ISS Facility Services UK, Debra Ward.
Hi, Phil. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Outstanding.
Great stuff. Whereabouts in the world are you right now?
I am in Teddington, looking out and projecting snow in April.
I know. It's nuts, isn't it? And it was only last week, it was 22 degrees or something like that.
I was out painting the fence last weekend, and this weekend I'll be shoveling my drive.
Yeah, it's insane. Welcome to global warming. Great stuff. Well, I mean, I'm conscious of time today because you're a very busy lady, so I'm just going to crack on and get straight to it. Perhaps you could just take us all the way back to the beginning of your career and walk us through your journey and tell us how you got to where you are now.
Okay, all the way back. All
Go.
Right.
Yes.
So actually, I actually started in hospitality. So my father, my parents owned restaurants and bars. And so I got to learn very young that if I wanted to know my dad, I had to get to know his business. So kind of followed him around and started as a busboy and then into the dish pit and then on the line in the kitchen and, then a waiter and a bartender and then a manager. So, I was really fortunate that I got to practice and learn on his watch.
Yeah.
That said, I think there's nothing worse than being the boss's daughter.
Yeah. Nowhere to hide.
Nowhere to hide and just everybody watching, right? So, and on top of that, it was a really small town. So, and you kind of need to be twice as good, right? You can't give anybody an opportunity to shoot you down. So it was great learning from that perspective. And, both my folks have been very encouraging and, from a small town of 2,500 in Northern Quebec, Canada. But, his bar was the number one bar in all of the Eastern Townships that used to just have lineups out the door.
Right.
On a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night for 2 hours with people coming in from Montreal and from America, and just an exciting place to be. Yeah. And then I went to school. I did a hotel and food commerce degree in Guelph, Ontario, which was just fantastic because it kind of gave me an opportunity to back up what I'd seen with some academics and some theory. And that was really interesting. Although I think my professors didn't think it was so interesting because I'd be like, that doesn't work. They'd be spouting out theory and I'd be like, yeah, I know for a fact that doesn't work or something. But that was great. And then I am really fortunate. I got to work with what was CP Hotels, the Pacific Hotels, that was bought out by Fairmont about 10 years ago. But, some historic, beautiful hotels and one of 12 MITs. And just got to really learn about hotel and in the Royal York Hotel, which is in Toronto and one of their largest flagships and where the Queen stays, because she's on our money too, of course.
Of course, yes.
Of course, yes. And so, massive hotel in a big thriving city. So coming from a town of 2,500 people, where the hotel actually held more than my whole hometown.
That's
so it was Yeah, really mad, but worked with George McNeil, who's culinary Olympic chef and is now the global Ritz-Carlton chef. So you really, again, really fortunate, opened 4 restaurants for them and then went on to do resort and then did my master's in organizational behavior and change management, which was really interesting. And halfway through it, I got a call from a headhunter to go and work for Wolfgang Puck.
Oh, damn these headhunters.
I know, but Wolfgang Puck, like that was just like, oh my God, you drop everything. So I was halfway through my master's and I was like, okay, the master's will be there. This opportunity may not. So there was a catch, however. They wanted me to open in Kuwait.
Okay.
As a woman in her early 20s with long blonde hair in a Muslim country with no alcohol. So I'm pretty sure I can do anything.
There's no challenge
now.
there at all, is there?
No, and so I was really fortunate. I got to train with Wolf in Irvine or in LA at Spago, which was really fun, and then again in LA and in Irvine, California, and opened a restaurant for him in Seattle, and then shipped off to Kuwait. So that was quite the experience.
And if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to say the specific year, but what kind of rough timeline are we on here?
What would that have been? About 30 years ago, I mean. Yeah,
right, okay. So we would have been it would have been on the cusp of trouble, I suppose.
It was on the cusp of trouble. And God bless my mother, right? She was packing my bags and she, of course, she was
Couldn't wait to get rid of you.
Absolutely terrified, but my folks have both been so, if you want it, whatever you want, you can do. I have 3 sisters, so all girls, and both my parents were the biggest feminists I know, and nothing was off limits. So just go and try, and I think also having that small town Canadian mentality, I just didn't perceive danger because I never grew up with it, right? So I'd be like, la 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 la,
ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss.
I remember when I first got to London, I was walking down the street with who was my boyfriend. I'd be like saying hi to everybody, and he's like, "What are you doing? They are gonna lock you up."
Do you watch stand-up comedy at all?
I do.
Do you watch? You ever watched Catherine Ryan?
Yes.
She's got some great sketches on coming from small town Canada and going to the Big Smoke and the like. So I can that's the comedy version. I can only imagine that the real life version also has its own comedy.
It really, really does, and some of it is black comedy.
Yeah.
Of course, but a lot of it, I feel so. What's the saying? I think it was in Groundhog Day, thank the Lord for giving you the common sense to live in a small town. Right? So, just coming from a small town, I think there's a lot of sense of community and, the whole, it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, I know that if I skip school to go up to the ski mountain on a spring day to go spring skiing, and I'd fake that I was sick or something and get off the school bus and then hitchhike up to the mountain. By the time I got there, my mom knew where I was.
Yeah.
There was no hiding, but it was also really safe. Like people looked after each other. We didn't lock our doors. We left the keys on the floor of our car in case somebody wanted to borrow it. I mean, who does that?
My word. God, I suppose even of its time, there just wouldn't have been anywhere, not in any place like London or anywhere like where you would do something like that. That shows you that the sense of community must have been really, really strong.
Oh yeah, everybody knew everybody's car. So if you saw somebody else in somebody's car, then you'd call them and be like, "Hey, John, so somebody was in your car." "Oh yeah, that was my nephew who's just borrowing it for the day or whatever."
Yeah, and somebody really comes to town with a Ferrari and then never gets to actually drive it themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if somebody came to town in a Ferrari, everybody would know.
Yeah.
I remember when my husband first came to Knowlton. That's where I'm from, Knowlton with a K. And when he first came to town, he called it Truman's World because people were like, "Hi, David. Hi, David. Hi, David." He's like, "How do they know who I am?" I'm like, "Well, my mom probably went to the post office and then to the bank and then to the pharmacist and told them you were coming." So.
But that's actually really lovely because there are other communities that don't have that kind of, they're quite cliquey, and they I think to have that much openness, you could almost say that maybe that was your hospitality grounding came from your community.
Absolutely, because there is, you called everybody sir and ma'am, and there was this whole respect thing in the community, and there was, certainly there were, the baddies and things like that, but what was considered bad was not bad. It was just maybe mischievous opposed to bad, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, your sense of community and hospitality was about, looking after each other, looking after, if somebody, when my mom died, I was here in London. My sister was in Vancouver. One of them was in Montreal, and the other one was in my hometown. And we all arrived at the airport within 2 hours of each other. But when I was the last to arrive, and when I arrived, there was probably 30 people from our community who were at the airport, and with car seats and whatever we needed, and they circled. And I remember getting off the plane and seeing my dad and my sisters and just giving them a big hug, and the whole 30 people just closed ranks in this circle around us to give us that moment. It was just, it's what, you just can't. Yeah, you can't. That is just, it's unbelievable. And I am very blessed to have had that as my grounding. And it taught me a lot about being respectful of people's space and culture. Being in Kuwait was really interesting. And one of the greatest pieces of advice I was ever given, because I was there from groundbreaking to ribbon cutting. So, a woman telling engineers in Kuwait that they're constructing the kitchen wrong, you need to be very diplomatic, and you need to understand, you need to pick your moment, you need to pick your words, and you need to be very careful of how you communicate that conversation. But before I went to Kuwait, somebody said to me, remember, you are a visitor. Make no mistake about it. You are a visitor. This is not your home. This is not your culture. This is not, you can't go charging in and want to change everything. And it to this day is still the greatest piece of advice, because I've been here 23 years now, 22 years now, and I still oddly feel a lot like a visitor.
Right. Interesting.
Well, there's certain norms in the UK that we don't have. There's certain subtleties and that just aren't like that in Canada.
Yeah, you don't say hello to everyone that you meet in the street.
Well, they don't do it all over Canada either. Although I have to say, the whole have a nice day, y'all. In America, when somebody tells you to have a good day in Canada, they genuinely mean it. It's not repartee.
Yeah.
And in Kuwait, when we opened our restaurant, one of the things, one of the customs is to slaughter 3 goats on your front door.
My goodness.
And to put your hands in the blood of the goats, and to put them over the windows and the doors to ward off the evil spirits. And then they butcher the meat and give it to the poor.
Right.
And as the GM, my job was to put my hands in this blood. And again, I'm, I don't know, 29, 25. I don't remember how old I was, years old. And I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And I really sat with myself and thought, when in Rome.
That was exactly the phrase that came to my head around if you actually end up doing it,
Yeah. I did it. And it was, it was I got to be part of something that I wouldn't have experienced any other way. If I had stood back like some foreigner, but it was really peaceful and really spiritual. And, the way that the whole thing transpired, and the way the meat goes to the poor, and the prayer that happens. It was the first time again, coming from a town of 2,500 people, right? We have no street lights. We have no elevators or lifts except for in the aging homes. There's more cows than people in my hometown. And so, I remember when the first person of color moved into my hometown. I remember I was in my late teens when the first gay person moved to my hometown. These are big issues in my town, like, big events in my hometown. And here I am in Kuwait, and having to understand how to rota for prayer time, and how to ensure that there is, water so that they can wash their feet and their hands before prayer.
Yeah.
And, I was just such a sponge. I was fascinated, absolutely fascinated, because of course I'd been so vanilla in my exposure, Protestant or Catholic. That was
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
That's
And
phenomenal, though. That kind of richness it brings to your life, right? Because because you've applied that sort of same logic to, I'm a visitor here, so who am I to tell anybody to do anything? Or if I am going to tell somebody to do something, I have to go about it in the right way. It just really opens your eyes, doesn't it, into the fact that there is a whole world out there.
yeah, I mean, there's some, downsides too. If you're caught as a woman at that time after 11 o'clock at night alone, you were considered a working girl
Really?
and
Wow.
automatically arrested on the spot.
Right.
And of course, because my restaurants didn't close till 10:30,
Yeah.
by the time you cash out and clean up, it's over after 11. And what do I do? So I ended up buying a blow-up doll and dressing it and putting it in the passenger seat. So when I drove home, I didn't get stopped.
Oh my word.
It was the only way to avoid it. Like,
God, yeah. Do you know, the when I started this podcast, I didn't ever hope to I mean, the stories that I've come across with the people that I speak, but that's the first time that anybody's had to put a blow up doll in the passenger seat just so that they can get home.
Oh yeah, it was insane. I was thrown in jail in Kuwait because I ordered Christmas tree lights. So I worked for the Al Hamezi family, which is number 1 or 2, depending on who you ask, on the OPEC ladder. And the Al Sabaz family owned the TGIF on the Gulf Coast. And it just did, there's just this rivalry, right? Because they're just a rich rivalry. Anyway, so I ordered Christmas tree lights for my palm trees instead of festive lights. And of course, I used the words Christmas. And so that was the premise on which they said they were arresting me. And, next thing I know, I'm off to jail.
Wow.
And it was just to scare me off, thinking that let's scare the little girl and she'll go back and they won't open, or we'll at least delay it.
Yeah.
So, interesting.
Did it
interesting
work?
Time.
Did it scare you off?
No, I knew, interestingly enough, I knew how powerful the family I worked for was. I was there for 20 minutes. I mean, I'm not going to comment on to how I got released so quickly and what transpired for that to happen. But yeah, it was 20 minutes. And I was never, interestingly enough, I was never scared. I've been more terrified on the streets of LA than I was in Kuwait.
Right.
I never felt that. But in Africa, so after that job, I ran 2 resorts in the Gambia, West Africa. I terminated my director of food and beverage for taking blood money from the staff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was painful. I mean, these people are beautiful. And I have to say, it taught me so much about pride. There's no more pride than in the African people. They would come to work. A lot of them, were on ground dirt huts with no electricity. They were on a grid, so every quart, it was split into 4. So you got electricity kind of every second week.
Goodness gracious, yeah.
And yet they would come to work in immaculate uniforms, pressed. There's dust everywhere because of the dirt roads. Their shoes are polished so you can see your face in them. And when I was working in Irvine, kids would pull their uniforms out of the bottom of a gym bag and think that should impress me because they remembered it. So the pride of the African people was just so astounding to me. But I had to terminate this guy for taking blood money. And again, highly connected communities, right? So they have their own ways. And I guess I really went about this wrong. It obviously, a big lesson for me. I think that what I did was right. Perhaps the way I went about it was wrong, because the next thing I know, I had 4 NIA guards with semi-automatic rifles charge into my office and haul me off and interrogate me for 4.5 hours.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And
who have I invited on the show? This is never heard anything like it.
I know.
I feel like I'm quite a well-traveled guy, but geez, Louise, I've not come across any of this before.
It turns out that the gentleman I terminated his employment for taking blood money his cousin was the head of the NIA in the National Intelligence Agency.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah. That was, you were definitely on a losing one with that one.
Yeah. Pick your battles and understand your audience. Right?
Yeah.
Again,
Well, see,
lessons learned.
these are great lessons for management and leadership as you progress up the, yeah. But by God, you'd hope you'd get them in a kind of less dramatic way.
Yeah. But you know, like,
Well,
the African people are so. The other thing it taught me in Africa is they're so literal. You know,
right.
like everything is. So you need to understand how you use your words when you describe things. So, you know, when I first moved into the villa, I was on a 5-star. I rent a 3-star inclusive and a 5-star exclusive resort. And when I moved into my villa on the 5-star, it was just kind of staff quarters, but beautiful. You know, had a lawn, had everything. And the gardener comes up and says, "Miss Debra, you know, how do you want me to tend to your lawn?" And I'm like, "I don't know, it's hot here. You know, Muhammad, do it. What do you normally do? Like, I guess water it every day." And of course, you know, I look out on rainy season and Muhammad's out there watering like my lawn. I said, "Muhammad, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Miss Debra, you said every day." And I was like, "Yeah, my fault. You're absolutely right." You know, so you learn to be careful with your words.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, you're adapting and being respectful of the company that you keep.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, the pride and absorption. I mean, because education is not, and training isn't readily available to them. You know, when I came in, I did so much training around guest interaction and service and, you know, anticipating needs and leadership training for some of the supervisors. And I've never had a more attentive, you know, audience in my life, I think. And they were just sponges, just really desperate for information and knowledge. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And, you know, the way you reward and recognize there is different. You know, for them, if somebody did really well, I would send, you know, a bag of rice into their village because they're feeding a whole community often on their salary, and it heralds them as the superhero of their community if I'm sending in, you know, a goat or a bag of rice or
Yeah.
you know, so they got to feed their whole village. It was great, really lovely.
Yeah.
And then I left there and came to London, and I worked with a wonderful group of hotels called the Red Carnation Hotel Group. You know,
Yeah.
small leading hotels of the world, and got to work with some great people. And
Didn't have to do anything with goats when you arrived there, or
no, not at
interrogate.
all.
Was their interview structure was like an interrogation? Maybe no.
No, it was
No.
quite good. And actually, Beatrice Tolman is, you know, just a phenomenal leader. She's the founder. Her and Stanley Tolman, you know, founded Red Carnation, and Malcolm Hendry, who was voted the #1 leading GM by Condé Nast. So, you know, I get to work with them. So that was really great.
Yeah.
But, you know, then I had a baby, and hotels and babies are not the greatest, which is, you know, I then I finished my master's and started. Yeah, I know, finally. They don't have a lot of libraries in Kuwait and Africa that
No.
specialized in organizational behavior change, I found. And this is, of course, all pre-internet and Google searches and things like that. So
Yeah. I remember having to study under those horrific circumstances as well.
I said microfish to my son the other day, and he goes, "What?" Like, forget it. Forget it. You'll never understand the joys of going through stacks in a library and trying to find the right microfish, and then, you know, making notes and photocopying, and just different world for them, you know.
I know.
And, you know, for them to go past page 2 in a research is
Yeah,
that's big.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get to work with the Red Carnation Hotel Group, and then I went on to start my own company called Love Learn, and that was great because I had my babies and could kind of manage my time around my company, and really what I was doing was providing that cultural change and organizational behavior and service element into corporate buildings at a time where that didn't really happen.
Okay.
You know, back then, if the security guard kind of grunted at you, you were doing well. So it was all about bringing in service culture and getting people to understand, that mission statement that you hang up on the wall has to mean more than just words. And I remember bringing in the C-suite of one company and showing, 6 different mission statements that were all pretty similar. They all used the similar kind of words. I said, which ones are yours? And they couldn't tell me. I was like, well, there's your problem right there.
Yeah.
So that was great. I got to do that for 7 years. And then I was consulting with Mighty. And they at the time I was consulting to what was solely Merrill Lynch back then. And
Okay. Yep.
on a retender. And the whole thing was built around creating a brand new company for Mighty. So Mighty is actually an acronym that stands for Management Incentive Through Investment Equity. Not many people know that, but
No, I didn't know that. This is such an educational podcast that you're gifting me today. It's yeah, this is great.
oh,
Carry on,
thank
carry on.
you. So Mighty is like a dragon's den. So you pitch your idea to the board, and if they like it, they take 51% of it. But they put up 51% of the capital to start it. So the cleaning company, the engineering company, the catering, that's how they all started.
Wow,
Initially
that's
was
brilliant.
through that. And so I pitched my idea to the CEO and to the C-suite, and they liked the idea. I had a business plan for this 5-star front of house company. It would include events and meeting room management and help desk and call centers and telephony based services, along with the front of house and reception. And so that she loved it, and she's like, great, rock on. And so started myself and a handful of people. I think there's 3 of us at the time, and we took it to 25 million in 5 years, 950 people across the UK, and just had the ride of my life.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, it was just so fun. And we got to do the whole thing. I got to put my money where my mouth is, right? I've been talking about culture as a differentiator for years, and people kind of rolling my eyes about, oh, the pom-pom girl, the fluffy stuff. And so our whole company was built on one strapline, which is creating exceptional, memorable experiences, one guest at a time. And we didn't list values or anything else. And we just created an acid test. Is it exceptional? Is it memorable? If the answer is yes, do it. The answer is no, don't do it. Do it again. Don't hire them. If they're not exceptional, and they're not memorable, don't, so it really was the basis of every decision we made, including our tenders, our training, our recruitment, everything.
Just well, I mean, I'm sure it's not simple, but it is a simple concept that why have all of these extra things when this actually applies to every single thing that we do. So why don't we just utilize that as our acid test?
Yeah. It worked because, all 950 people across the UK when I left there, grew to just over 1,200. But that everybody knew that, and everybody used that as their yardstick for everything we did. There's a great story. And for the first 2 years, I was a bit of a micromanager on that, because it was so important for me to break out of that traditional FM process driven, because we in FM, everybody has so many, health and safety and compliance and yada, 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 yada. And front of house is very different. And, I really wanted us to break that mold a little bit. Still, of course, still put, health and safety first, but not at the expense of experience.
Yeah.
And so I remember, we were, one of the things we used to do is give, when we 2P'd people in, or when we started a new contract, we would get little sachets of jelly bellies with a card that says, creating exceptional, memorable experiences, one guest at a time, and welcome to client services. And I would sign it, and I'd go around and meet everybody with the senior leadership team. And so we get to know people on, at least that one time as we got bigger. But and the day before we were going live, the head of comms, I see her, and she's putting jelly beans into sachets. I said, Julia, what are you doing? She's like, well, we're going live tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm so excited. She's like, we've got 50 people coming into the organization. I said, I get it. That's great. I said, but what are you doing? And she looks down, I'm staring at these jelly beans, right? And she goes, I couldn't find Jelly Bellies. And I was like, Julia, we are not a jelly bean company. We are a jelly belly company. Jelly beans you find in petrol stations. We that's not who we are. And she's like, but we're going live tomorrow. And this is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, I don't care. You're going to have to figure it out. No, bless her cotton socks. I don't know how she did it, but she pulled it off and we got jelly bellies for the next day.
Right. I can just feel the sort of series of events in her own brain there about the fact that we don't have jelly bellies to hand, but we do have jelly beans, so that'll do. I'll just make do with that, and then you come along and go, no, it won't, and it's like, and initially that probably sums up a lot of what happens when you're operating at an exceptional level, is that a lot of people's first reaction is, oh, I can't do that, when they're not used to operating at that level. And this, it's a subtle mind shift change, but what happens ultimately is that then people start focusing on what they can do rather than what they can't do. And what you did there was just a subtle nudge in the right direction.
Yeah. And became folklore, of course, right?
Yeah.
It becomes folklore in an organization and everybody talks about it. And so that was, it was really great. And
every time you went by, everybody went, oh, there's that bloody jelly belly woman.
Well, actually, it was about toilet paper.
Okay.
So I always,
there.
when we had people came into our organization, I only ever asked them one question. So I always got to meet them at the end. And I just say, does toilet paper come from off the top or off the bottom?
Right.
And if they answered it wrong, they didn't get the job.
Okay. Just repeat that.
Does toilet paper come from off the top or off the bottom?
God, well, I'm not going to answer it because I'm feeling the pressure.
Comes from off the top, Phil.
Does it? Right. Okay. Yeah. You mean, so does it go over or does it come from? Yeah. That's always from over. Always from over. I've had this debate on social media. A very, very important debate.
Well, I mean, it's just the biggest joke. And then, then one of the head of training, Tom Robinson, great guy, he found the original patent for toilet paper roll, and that clearly showed that it had to come from off the top. And he sent it to me. The number of times I get people sending me pictures of toilet paper rolls, whether they have a rose on them or somebody's folded them into a fan, or put a little V in them. So. Very, that's what I'm kind of known for. That panicky. I never use the word employees. I ban the word employees. So, the first tender we went out, I just took a red pen, and we're team members and we're in this together. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, that culture piece starts from the top, right? And if you're a big believer in it, then it might take a bit of time, but generally speaking, and you're consistent, people will get it in the end.
And I think it goes back to Africa, right? The power of language.
Yeah.
And how you use language. Exceptional is different than good or great, right?
Yeah.
It just is, right? Yeah. Are you being exceptional? Are you being memorable? And if somebody would come to, I really never had to give anybody a hard time. They'd bring me something and I'd look at it and I would say, is that exceptional?
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, they would just, you could see their shoulders drop and their head drop and they'd be like, no, and they'd go back, off they'd go. And that was the end of it, right? They'd come back to me when it was. And that's the power of that. And so it showed me a lot. And the team were phenomenal. I was very blessed. I had a great team, a great leadership team that just kind of rolled their eyes and did it anyway. As I say. Here she goes again,
like that.
Yeah, here she goes again, the crazy Canadian. So and then I from there I've not always moved for the right reasons or the right time, and I worked for a construction company for a while, and that was just the wrong culture, right? It really showed me, my head was turned, I was headhunted, my salary was doubled. But the culture was wrong. And I thought, well, I'm a certified executive coach. I'll pull out my toolkit and I'll be able to change this. And, there's only so much you can do. And you get to I think the thing that really I learned is, do I have the power and influence to make the changes I believe are needed? And the answer is no, then I've either become part of the problem, right? If I stay. And so, it was just I gave it a good old country try, and it just didn't work. And it just got to the point where I'm starting to not like who I'm becoming in this environment. And it just was the wrong move for me. Other people have thrived. And actually my leaving spurred some changes that they they couldn't have made unless they were shocked that way with my leaving. So that was really great for that reason. And we did some great things there as well. We expanded into America, and we, lots of good, the numbers were good, the numbers, we did a lot of great things in numbers. So, and then I went to tech to help a friend, which was also really exciting, and got to work with an entrepreneur, got some PE money. So you restructured Europe and put in some processes and procedures that enabled us to go after some really big PE money that was needed for growth. And, it was kind of a conscious choice because tech was not something I had a lot of knowledge in, and really wanted to understand it a little bit better. Very sales driven, which is also, I shied away from before.
Right.
So it gave me a really great avenue into that. Worked for JLL for a while and in the human experience, and loved it. Got to work with Neil Murray and Mark Caskey and Sue Asprey Price, and that was really exciting. And work with human experience and translate, again, achieve ambitions is their strapline. And interestingly enough, I was in a meeting and they were talking about promotion, and they do this kind of promotion round every year, and they can only, they had 3 people they were talking about in this meeting. I'd only been there for like 3 weeks. And they were talking about, well, I'm not sure, and we can only promote so many, and what do we do if we don't? And And they said, Deb, what do you think? And I said, I couldn't possibly comment. I've been here for a nanosecond. I don't know these people. I said, but here's my question: which one of these people is going to help you achieve your ambition? And 10 seconds later, they had the answer, right? So that's the power of a good strapline.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've read Blue Ocean Strategy.
I actually haven't. I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah, great book. And so they talk about 3 things that create blue oceans are clear blue water between you and your competitor, right? It's like a place to play. And red oceans are bloody, right? So there's high competition, low margins, knives out kind of competitive environment. And blue ocean is clear blue space between you and your competitor. And they said to create blue ocean strategy, you need 3 things, which is focused, divergent, and a compelling strapline.
Right.
And when I think of the companies that do it great, just do it. How much better does it get than that?
I know.
Right?
I know.
It's just ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, Ritz-Carlton, right? Absolutely, positively must get there overnight. Just so many great, powerful straplines that tell people what they need to do and drive those behaviors, right? So all the way down the line, doesn't matter who you are in the organization. If you can look at your strapline and know, and that drives the right behavior, I think it's pretty powerful.
No doubt. Do you also think that people who come up with straplines have a career in card writing?
Probably.
It's one of my favorite things to do if ever I'm feeling a little bit down or depressed is, well, I used to go into card shops. Remember when you could go into shops?
Yeah.
Oh, it's coming back. And just pick up random cards and read the comedy ones, and I would generally always walk out of the shop much happier than I walked in.
Yeah.
I didn't buy any cards.
Stickers. Bumper stickers, right? Bumper sticker writer or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then I loved doing that. I loved being in a place where the human experience that was created a lot by Dr. Marie Pubarot, and she did a whole thing on engage, empower, fulfill as a way to enhance productivity in the workplace. So I was able to, a lot of what she did was theoretical, right? And I worked in an operations team. And so it was my ability to translate her theory into operations so that everybody throughout the organization understood what that meant. And so, like I said, bringing the achieve ambitions to life in our everyday vernacular and our decision making and our value set. So how does that drive behaviors and actions? So I absolutely loved it. Loved it. I can't say a bad word about it at all.
It does sound very interesting, being able to take that kind of high level theory and figuring out actually, this comes back to almost the role reversal of you in the classroom at the beginning when they're teaching you the theory of operations and actually you've already got some real world experience and you go, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Exactly the same principle, I suppose, just on a slightly higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was fun to watch the penny drop for people too. Like, oh, that was really cool to see how people were like, oh, okay, I could just apply this and that will actually drive my behaviors, or that will get me to the right outcome. So yeah, I really loved it. However, I was given an opportunity to do kind of another startup. The thing I found, the struggle I had was I was in a big organization, which often, you don't move as quickly as sometimes you want to.
Mm.
And being an entrepreneur, I kind of move fast and break things. So I was asked to go and work with Cam and Hooper, which is an events company, and have an equity stake as the managing director and drive change and again, create a strap line, create a belief, and make sure that we were doing things differently, create that blue ocean kind of competitive arena.
Yeah.
And again, had a great time, really enjoyed what we were doing there, but of course, and was very fortunate. So I worked on the last thing I did with Cameron Hooper was to create the Battersea Power Station bid for events. And of course, we were in the arena with the big players, and we were the David in the David and Goliath
Right.
organization. And again, the power of words and the power of storytelling was so evident there. And so we won. It was, £800 million bid, the biggest career win I've ever had in my life. And then COVID hit.
Right.
So that was, that was devastating. And, kind of euphoria to devastation in 3 months almost.
Yeah. Well, that sums up COVID perfectly.
Yeah, it did. And, it just, Imbiba is a investment fund, EIS investment firm, and last MD in, first out kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so what they did was take all of their organizations and consolidate them. So, but still a great company, great opportunity, and I was thrilled to have it, and I was thrilled to be part of the Battersea bid because we did the way that we won that was to create literally a child's storybook on the back of our bid about the sleeping giant, the Riverside Giant, and awakening the Riverside Giant and what that would look like. And
Right.
so we sent in our kind of compliant bid, which was 250 characters or whatever it is that you in those stupid little boxes that you have to send in. But then we also then created this massive kids storybook that started with Once Upon a Time, and it was all about awakening the sleeping Riverside Giant, and that there was this Princess Claire who's going to look for her palaces, and so we talk about finding each of the different venues and how they're different, and the jewels in the crown, and that we've come across the largest of them all, and that's so we had it bound and we had it put in a storybook, and we sent it off with a lot of our we have a chief booze engineer at Cam and Hooper, and so he had created several different concoctions of gins and things that we renamed to fit the period, ladies in waiting water and things like that.
Mm.
And we sent the whole box off to the bid team, and they then asked us for another one, and they sent it off to the investment company and in Malaysia, and that's what won us the bid. So again, the power of storytelling, which is, I think people want to hear the story. They don't want a sales pitch anymore. They want to hear the investment. And
I couldn't agree more. Just imagine the pitch documents that they read where they're, it's the same language that people are just reusing to try and depict a USP, and actually you've depicted a USP by acting differently.
Yeah, and showing that we care enough to think differently, right? I think that's the other thing. It's like you're not going to just chop and change or cut and paste. That we really went out of our way to pitch it differently. And then post COVID, I was great opportunity here with ISS, and I again just absolutely loving what I'm doing because again I get to bring some amazing world first visionary programs to life. And when we look at what is everybody's talking about what's the world of work going to look like after COVID, and and for me it's about creating FOMO. It's really fear of missing out. We want people to rejoice and celebrate and collaborate and come to work because they want to. I mean, if you want to bang out emails, you can do that from anywhere. We've proven that. If you want to have a Zoom meeting, you can do that from anywhere. But if you want to collaborate and if you want to, also pamper yourself a little bit, right? So some of the stuff we're working on is around creating spaces that match the work that you do, and you will go towards those spaces for the work. So you will go to a different space if you're doing a contract than if you were doing emails, than if you were spending time connecting with people. And to your point,
very interesting.
Very interesting. And the biggest thing, you were talking about earlier, which I couldn't concur more with, before we started the recording, was just how much organizations now need to focus on well-being and looking after the whole individual. The emotional, the physical, the social, the intellectual elements of a human being. And I'm so thrilled that that's happening. I'm just about to hire a well-being manager who's going to start to look at everything we do through that lens. How does food play a part? How does air quality play a part? Where are we using that? Are we sending push notifications for people to move every 90 minutes so they don't just, sit and be sedentary? How are we introducing exercise and food and water and nutrition into everyday parts of their life, so it's not all about work?
Yeah,
it's fascinating stuff.
Sounds it, and it sounds like it's a phenomenal opportunity actually to utilize the world that we've been given on the back of this thing that we've all had to kind of come to terms with. But in actual fact, it does give us all an opportunity to really analyze what wasn't working before. Let's make sure that what we come out of works well for everyone. I think
takes me right back to the beginning, Phil, which is it's all about community.
Yeah. But I couldn't agree. Couldn't agree more. I think that there's a book out there. I think it's called The Systemic Win. I don't know if you've come across that one.
Nope, but
it is literally about the fact that in any, I'm going to use the word transaction, there's probably a better word out there for that, but in any coming together of two people / businesses / business or a team member or whatever, the best solution is one where both of those parties that are involved are happy and are coming out of that having won, basically. And if you can create I was going to say create a world, that sounds very woo-woo, but if you can create a place, an environment whereby everybody who's involved in that environment has wins, then that has to be very, very powerful.
And I would take that a step further. You're absolutely right. But I take it a step further. It's about the culture, because the environment is no longer one specific place. It could be home. It could be an office. It could be a third-party place. So, it's about creating that culture that gives everybody a win.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So great to talk to you, Phil. I could talk forever to you. It's so much fun.
Bless you. Yeah, no, I'm very conscious of time, so I will wrap it up. I think we probably have to come back and do a part 2 at some point.
I would love that.
Yeah. But no, I really appreciate you giving us so much time. There's so many other questions I'd love to ask you, but we'll do that another time. And I wish you all the very best in what sounds like a really, really fabulous and very interesting role.
Thank you so much. Stay safe, sane, and smiling.
You too, like that. I'm nicking that as well. Thanks very much.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye. And there we have it. Debra had some incredible stories from her career so far, and I feel like we only just scratched the surface. A huge thank you to her for coming on and sharing her story. Don't forget, we'll be back at 8 PM next Wednesday with more stories from hospitality. But until then, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.